can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tapped. You are tapped in. Let's get right to it. So news is that 2 CIA agents were killed in Mexico. The reason behind these deaths are, I think, what they are considering to be suspect. The car supposedly that carried the CIA agents in it went over a cliff. When I heard that, I started to think immediately, yeah, something sounds fishy about that. But the real context to the story is the CIA's involvement in Mexico, also in a previous drug raid on a drug production facility or area. CIA went in and, raided this area. As a result, these agents who were involved in that ended up dead. All right. So, you get to thinking about the cartel and things of that nature when you hear about things like that. It is our thought that could have been, it's related. That's our thought. It could possibly be related. These agents were, and by Mexicans' account, they're illegally orchestrating a raid on a drug compound in Mexico. I think the location was Chihuahua. Well, in any respect, I have a clip. I want to drop this clip for you guys so that we can get some more information about what led to this or what this may be all about. Before we do, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Tapped, the Art of Political Discourse. We appreciate you guys' involvement and participation. So thanks for that. And again, help us to reach the mark of 5,000 subscribers for this channel. You guys' participation, that also is appreciated. Let's get to this clip because I think there's something to it and we may not hear the last of this. Okay. I also like to think that there's something going on with the U.S. and Mexico. There's something that's going to take place sooner rather than later. This is my speculation. I want to be the first to say that in any respect. Something is going to take place in Mexico that's going to involve the U.S. government and is going to create this incident or this clash between the two countries, Mexico and the United States. Let's get to this clip. Let's see if we can make of this. And this is courtesy of Fox News, okay?
New details this hour about 2 Americans who were killed in Mexico after their car plunged 600 feet off a cliff. And now new questions about their reported ties to the CIA.
Now, that's what I'm saying. Something is not right about this. It plunged off of a cliff 600 feet. That's possible. Could it have been pushed over the cliff? That's possible. What is really behind this? I'm telling you, this is going to come to light. But again, the most pressing issue at this point is the death of the 2 CIA agents. However, the bigger issue, and this is Mexico's concern, what were you guys doing in our country?
Senior foreign policy correspondent Jillian Turner is live at the State Department with the latest. Jillian.
Good afternoon to you, John. New bombshell reporting out now that these U.S. officials who were killed over the weekend, alleged to be U.S. embassy officials assigned there, were in fact CIA operatives who were working on a Mexican cartel drug bust. This, according to the Washington Post. Now, Mexico's president, CLUDIA SHEINBAUM, says that Americans were not authorized to be in that region of the country and may have in fact violated Mexico's national security laws.
Now, that's the bigger issue of the whole. That's the context of this story. Yes, the death of the 2 CIA agents is an issue, no doubt about that. But the bigger issue that's coming out or coming into play is that they were there illegally. They weren't there with the consent or the agreement of the Mexican government to be orchestrating this raid, having this narco operation going on. They did it without the knowledge and consent of the Mexican government. And I think that's going to be the bigger issue.
No teníamos conocimiento.
We were not aware of any direct work or coordination between the state of Chihuahua and personnel from the U.S. Embassy in Mexico. So we are requesting all the information from the government of Chihuahua and also from the United States government and reviewing whether there is any violation of the national security law.
At this site, it was a suspected chemical drug lab run by Mexican cartels. U.S. as well as Mexican officials managed to seize chemical reactors, mixing instruments and storage containers, gas tanks, all this in a rural part of Mexico's Chihuahua region, where these two American officials and actually two Mexican officials also with the local Chihuahua State Investigation Agency all died.
Okay, so that's a total of 4 individuals as a result of this narco operation who lost their lives. But again, I think the greater context is the fact that they were there without authorization, orchestrating a raid on this facility, this drug chemical plant. And Mexico is it would seem that they are upset about that. Okay, you're in our country doing this, but you're not telling us you're doing this in our country. This seems to be an issue. Again, I think there's something going on with the United States government in terms of the cartels, and they are not informing the Mexican government that they are there committing or in an act of a war, a drug war against the cartels. Mexico, again, seems to be upset about this. I'm pretty sure Mexico knows or has an idea that the United States, in its way, in terms of how America does things, especially the government, against those who they don't see eye to eye with, in this case, the Mexican cartels. Donald Trump has said in the past that he doesn't think that SHEINBAUM, the president of Mexico, or even the Mexico government are serious about the drug trade coming out of Mexico, the drugs coming out of Mexico and going into the United States. There is also the possibility that there's something way greater than that occurring. Maybe, okay, we're not getting our cut or whatever the case may be. We're not running that. That's a lucrative business. Donald Trump is about business. There's no telling what this thing is really about. But the fact of the matter is that they're over there without the consent or knowledge of the Mexican government.
There was a convoy of 5 vehicles. The crashed vehicle was in front, leading the convoy. It was nighttime. We are talking about around 2 a.m., and it appears to have skidded in one area and fallen into a ravine, causing the pickup truck to explode.
So all of this, John, as you can imagine, raises some meaty questions about the U.S. relationship with Mexico. President Trump, as you well know, often touts his closeness with Mexico's president. She is now calling out the United States and saying your officials weren't authorized to be here. She's also investigating, as I mentioned earlier, to see now whether they violated any national security laws. And, John, all this against the backdrop of these two countries trying to renegotiate the USMCA trade deal right now. John.
Yeah. So, again, that to me is something that is, it's not clear what's really going on. And when we're talking about the deaths of these 4 individuals, 2 of which are CIA agents, they're being over there without authorization, orchestrating a narcotic raid in, the sovereign state or country of Mexico without their knowledge, again, is an issue. It is, or it could be considered that the United States is waging its own drug war against the cartels without the knowledge and participation of the Mexican government. It seems that way anyway. I have another clip I want to drop in here regarding this issue, because again, I think that this issue is, on the face of it, is bigger than what we at this juncture are know or understand. Okay, let me put it to you like this. And this clip I'm going to drop is from CBS News. Okay, we'll get their take on it as well and see what they have to say. Okay, sorry about that. There we go.
The circumstances of this incident. The first.
Developing right now, leaders in Mexico are demanding answers after 2 CIA employees were killed in a car crash following a drug lab raid. Now, it happened in the Mexican state of Chihuahua, which shares a border with Texas and New Mexico.
See, and one thing I want to point out right quick, the language being used is, the type of language where it's being used because there isn't any certainty in terms of how these agents or those 4 individuals actually died. All right. So you could say 2 CIA agents died plus 2 Mexican officials died in a car crash. A car went over the cliff, but they're saying were killed. They were killed. I just think there's a big difference, the connotations, of the words, when you apply them and use them a certain way, they actually mean something. All right. Now, the other thing that just struck me is that SHEINBAUM, the president of Mexico, said they had no knowledge of this. However, there were 2 Mexican officials in the truck with the 2 CIA agents. Make that make sense. Mexican officials in the truck with the CIA agents, and SHEINBAUM is saying that the Mexican government did not authorize or even know about this operation. Make that make sense.
Mexico's president says she was not aware of the drug raid and that collaborations between the local government and U.S. without federal permission violate Mexican law. I want to bring in CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis. Olivia, great to be with you. There's always a lot of secrecy around anything involved with the CIA. So what do we know about why these agents were in Mexico in the first place?
Sure, Liz. Well, you're absolutely right that there's still a lot of seeming contradictions and definite unknowns here. And there is still an investigation ongoing. So the U.S. government, for its part, has had very little to say publicly about the circumstances of this incident. The first indication of which we got from a brief social media post by the U.S. ambassador to Mexico. So what we've been able to piece together from U.S. and Mexican officials who are familiar with the situation so far is that this crash happened in northern Mexico shortly after a counter-narcotics operation that was carried out, we understand, by Mexican authorities. 2 U.S. officials who we have now confirmed to be employees of the CIA met with Mexican officials tied to that operation after it concluded. And while returning from that meeting, their vehicle went off the road and plunged into a ravine, killing 4.
Now, that's the narrative, all right? That's the story we're being told, and she is helping to put forth that narrative. Again, there's no real certainty in terms of what happened, why that particular car, out of a caravan of 5 or 6, that truck went over a cliff and not the others. Something don't make sense. Something is not ringing true or right here. And again, whether it is Chihuahua, the city of Chihuahua, the state of Chihuahua, Mexico, in conjunction with CIA, or CIA having anything to do with this, still, the question begs to be answered. How is it that Chihuahua, Mexico is in doing this operation and the government, the federal government of Mexico, has no knowledge of this? However, the CIA does. Something doesn't sound right.
Again, we're told the circumstances are still being investigated, and it's very much worth noting that it is rare and unusual for any CIA-linked casualties to surface this publicly and in what's almost real time. The agency usually releases very little public information about their fallen beyond adding stars to the well-known memorial wall in their headquarters, which commemorates officers who've lost their lives in the line of duty. So it can take years and sometimes even decades to learn the specifics, but the speed and the visibility here of this incident is reflective, I think, of the intense level of scrutiny of the US's counter-narcotics missions around the world that have otherwise been a very visible priority for this administration.
And that's what I mean by that. Donald Trump and other agencies that he have directed to take up this matter, this war on drugs, or the war against the cartels, especially in South America, is something that is not really being publicized to the country or us here in the United States. There is a private war going on We aren't privy to that war just yet, but Mexico, I'm quite sure, knows that these things are occurring, and they're doing their best to not just allow it to happen, but not step on the toes, to not anger the Trump administration by intervening in military incursions to stop this production of drugs, as well as stop the flow of drugs into the United States. This is a war that I think, again, in due time, we'll hear more about this. Trump right now, something he has on the back burner, no doubt about that. Something he has on the back burner, and it could be bigger than what Trump says it is in terms of Mexico, the cartel the influx of drugs into the United States. It could be a bigger, there's a bigger picture here, I'm quite sure.
And Olivia, all this is coming as the U.S. has placed increased pressure on Mexico over drug trafficking. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, CIA, for its part, has a long history of running counter-narcotics operations worldwide,
as well as running drugs. All right. So, see, again, there's a lot going on here. And for the most part, a lot of us are not really privy to how the CIA or the U.S. government actually conducts its operations and or business. They run countermeasures, to stop certain cartels and, drugs from entering the U.S. from all over the world. But by the same token, they also push drugs. This is a fact. That's not an allegation. They also push drugs. U.S. government is in the business of drug sales and narcotics from big pharma on down to, low-level individuals or organizations like cartels. They're in the business for that. So yeah, it's more than just, trying to stop drugs. I think it's more wanting to control the product or the flow of drugs, how they're sold and, things of that nature. That's, it's my opinion.
But again, that mission has really been beefed up since John Ratcliffe, the current director, took the helm of the agency last year. Every director that comes in sort of sets and reshapes priorities for his workforce or her workforce. And one of Ratcliffe's earliest moves was to stand up a mission center dedicated to merging intelligence collection and analysis to target specifically drug trafficking and cartel networks, again, in line with the administration's priorities. Now, that has required, to a large extent, the cooperation of foreign governments to partner, including and especially maybe even Mexico's government. President CLUDIA, Sheinbaum, who you referenced, has previously publicly spoken to working much more closely with U.S. agencies on anti-drug missions. It's of course possible that she and other senior leadership in Mexico weren't read in on this specific activity, but this is definitely happening against a backdrop of openly acknowledged bilateral pushes for closer cooperation on counter-narcotics operations in particular.
All right. I just think that, okay, we're not getting the whole story. We get the gist of it, but we're not getting the whole story. And I think that would involve a lot of what is clandestine to become something that's out in the open. We have, to get those stories, then we would know exactly what's going on and whether or not these wars or these acts of aggression, the U.S. government, CIA going into Mexico to stop drug cartels is really that. Is it bigger than that? Is it bigger than that? It could very well involve drugs, but at the same time, does it have a greater connotation to it? America in Mexico. South America is a part of the Western Hemisphere. And Donald Trump has said openly that the United States means to have complete hegemony over the whole region. So there's a bigger picture. It could be narcotics, let's not just disregard that. But again, we think here at TAP that it's something bigger than that. And it's for America to say, okay, we want to stop the flow of drugs. We're against drug production, drug sales. That is not the truth. That is not the truth. And especially those in the Black community know that that's not the truth. All right. Tell us what you think. What are your thoughts on this? If you have any, drop them in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts on this exactly is. 2 CIA agents killed, as well as 2 other Mexican officials were also killed as a result, after the fact, of this drug raid in Chihuahua, Mexico. Okay, so until next time, you guys take care of yourselves and each other. This is Tapped.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.